But first, we're going to begin here in Washington with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy trying to convince his own members to back his plan to avoid the nation defaulting on its debt in just a few short weeks. McCarthy spoke with his members during a closed-door meeting on Capitol Hill today. He pledged to pass a bill to raise the debt limit for 1 year, but only if coupled with a 1% cap on future federal spending. Multiple Republican lawmakers said the details of the plan are still being worked out. The Speaker plans to get the package passed in order to kickstart the debt limit negotiations with the White House. For more on this, we have Nikole Killion and Nancy Cordes joining us now. Nikole is CBS News congressional correspondent up on Capitol Hill, and Nancy is CBS chief White House correspondent over at the White House. Nikole, I want to start with you on Capitol Hill and play a little bit of sound from what we've been hearing from lawmakers as they've been learning about McCarthy's plan.
Members still have a lot of questions about work requirements, about how we're going to look at the Inflation Reduction Act, because that's going to destroy our economy. So I still have more questions than answers at this point.
I think it's a good start. We got a lot of members who want to make sure we put some more meat on the bones, and we'll go from there.
I think there are a number of really critical details that we've still got to work out before making a final decision on a vote. But it's been a very productive discussion and a lot of good ideas.
So, Nikole, a pretty wide swath of the Republican Party in the House there. Two of those members voted against McCarthy for Speaker. Donald's eventually supported him. But, how is this message being received among Republicans? Are you sensing any kind of inching closer towards some kind of deal, or are the margins just so slim for McCarthy?
Well, this is going to be a big test for the Speaker, probably on par with what we saw at the beginning of the year with him just winning the gavel. But the Speaker remains confident that he can ultimately get his conference on board with this bill. That was in part the nature of this morning's GOP conference meeting, where the Speaker did try to sell membership on this, that this is probably the best deal that they're going to get in order to jumpstart debt limit negotiations, even though the White House and Democrats say that they don't think there should be any preconditions to lifting the debt ceiling. But that being said, as you heard from members there are a number of questions in terms of, for instance, should they raise the debt limit by a dollar amount, or in a given time period, like lift it, just for the period of a year? Should the issue of work requirements, as you heard Nancy Mace mention there. Another thing that Republicans are talking about is whether or not to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, that was a major package that was passed largely with Democratic support last year. Many conservative Republicans would like to repeal it altogether. That was the nature of a meeting that the Speaker had with some members earlier today after that GOP conference meeting. So there's still discussions happening behind closed doors. But again, ultimately, a GOP leadership is hopeful that they can move this forward.
And Nancy, obviously, this is a big hurdle for the House Republican Conference before it even gets over to the White House. But we already see Biden bashing this plan. Let's take a little bit of a listen to what he had to say today.
He proposed huge cuts to important programs that millions of Americans count on, middle-class, suburban, as well as inner-city folks. He threatened to become the first speaker to default on our national debt, which took over 230 years to accumulate. He threatened to be the first one to default on the debt, which would throw us in a gigantic recession and beyond, unless he gets what he wants in the budget.
So, Nancy, the White House has maintained this whole time that they are not negotiating over the debt ceiling. It doesn't seem like they're any closer to budging from that. Do you see them making any sort of plans, or is this really just waiting to see what the House does?
Yeah, no plans at the moment, Caitlin. They are watching the disarray in the House and waiting to see if Republicans themselves are able to coalesce around anything. As Nikole pointed out, Republicans have such a narrow majority in the House, they would need to keep their whole party together. And if there's one issue that tends to divide Republicans, it's spending cuts, because there are going to be a number of Freedom Caucus members, MAGA Republicans, who are going to want much larger spending cuts than Kevin McCarthy is ready to put on the table right now. And beyond that, even if Republicans were able to coalesce around some kind of spending cut bill in the House and push it through, you've got the Senate Democrats who control that body who are simply not going to take it up. And so it's hard to look at how all of this is shaping up and to not see disaster looming and to not see brinksmanship and to not see sort of a difficult impasse between the president and the House Speaker.
Nancy, and I know obviously you covered the White House, but you covered Capitol Hill extensively. I was just taking a look at our polling yesterday that shows that Americans don't want to default on the debt. I'm curious kind of how the Biden administration, how Democrats are kind of thinking about that when it comes to the inevitable blame game.
Well, the way it's worked out in the past is that the party that has appeared to be holding out, particularly holding out for something unreasonable or irrational, that tends to be the party that gets blamed if there is a default on the debt or the threat of a default on the debt, because we have never actually defaulted on our debt, or a downgrading of U.S. credit, or even a halt in government spending that leads to, say, a government shutdown. Typically, the party that's holding out and digging in is the party that gets blamed. And of course, you always see both parties in the run-up to these standoffs trying to pre-blame the other side, trying to say that they're the ones that are being intransigent. But what the White House is banking on right now, as they sort of sit back and watch this all play out, they believe that it's Republicans who will get blamed. Although certainly, as we know for time immemorial, if there is a bad economy, it is often the person in the White House who gets blamed. And if we see any of the economic effects that have been described by economists of a default on the debt, then that could be treacherous territory for the White House as well as congressional Republicans.
And as you both mentioned, the clock is ticking. Nikole Killion and Nancy Cordes on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue for us tonight. Thank you so much.